Hello.
Right, it looks like we got a couple of people on here, so we'll go ahead and start. My name's Angie Phillips, and my friend Susan and I started Activate Omaha so that we could try to help raise awareness to local issues and get people to take actions on the things that are affecting our community. One of the first things that we were looking at was this plan for the Juvenile Justice Center. We noticed that seemed to cost a lot, and it was moving forward really quickly, and we weren't sure that it was getting the amount of attention or input that was needed. So Susan was able to reach out to some people, and we discovered Brian Smith, who does Omaha public meetings and has been actively working on this and is very knowledgeable. So we asked him to come and do a presentation so that we could work on just raising more awareness to what the situation was and where it needed to go. Brian is a community activist, marketing and communications leader, a former TEDx Omaha producer. Brian creates platforms for people to assemble around ideas that affect the common good. Brian's current project is Omaha Public Meetings, a nonpartisan entity focused on public engagement, resident input, and government accountability at the municipal level. Brian has hosted several of these meetings to raise awareness, and he's very informed on the topic, so we're really happy to have him here. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead and switch Brian over to the host here, and he can get started on his presentation.
All right, so I should, if everything works correctly, we should have our screen share going here. So Angie, can you just let me know that's visible?
Yep.
Okay, super. So one of the things I wanted to start out with is that I've already run a couple of public meetings on this topic. The county commissioners are not running, so far have not run any sort of dialogue about this juvenile justice system that they've proposed. So I've taken it upon myself to have to get people together, and I'm really appreciative of this opportunity this morning. So what I'm going to start with here is what you can do. So if this is the first thing that you see, or the only thing that you see today, this is a step that you can take in the next several days, is to call your elected representatives. So the county commissioners, there are 7 of them. They're elected. They are supposed to be representing the county commission, or the needs of the county. And as of this point, they have not had any input from you or any dialogue. So we've had an opportunity here to call them and tell them to stop eminent domain on 420 South 18th Street. The reason that this is the most important short-term move is because if we can get them to stop eminent domain, taking a building by force from a private owner, it means that they need to start this process of planning this juvenile justice center, including a youth jail, with our input. So that's a major point here, is that if we can get them to stop eminent domain, that means that we have an opportunity to kind of restart the process. So that's the first thing to do. If you are interested in Omaha public meetings, here it is on Facebook, on Twitter, and then you can also email me directly, listening@omahapublicmeetings.com. So with Omaha, I just kind of want to give a little background. Omaha Public Meetings is about participatory democracy. So representative democracy, we're all familiar with, is we vote, and then our elected officials represent us and represent our interests. I would think that a lot of people on this call might agree that that's not working out so well for us right now, is that the people that we vote for are not necessarily doing the things that we want. Participatory democracy is an idea that gives us the opportunity to work with our elected officials. The idea, really the large idea here, is nothing about us without us. So in this particular instance with the Juvenile Justice Center, they have been, the county has been pushing this without the input that of the public and without the perspectives that they need in order to make this a really rich and effective way to handle the county's needs. So first of all, I kind of wanted to lay out what's happening here. So, and then the next question that we need to talk about is, how did we decide? So what's happening and how did we decide? So let's go with that first question here. This is a draft that HDR has given out to the public, and this is supposed to be their plan for the Juvenile Justice Center. And I do want to kind of use a couple of points here. So they have this right now, this space here has currently has 3 buildings on it. This is the courthouse over here. This is the city county building over here, which you would call City Hall. This is over here is MUD. They've got a building here. Note the very large parking lot that will come up later. And then also this here is a parking garage, and there's a underground tunnel from the parking garage to City Hall and to the courts. So we already have our juvenile and adult courts set up here. We've got City Hall here. And then right now there's the Omaha Housing Authority building here. There's a building here that houses .com, which is the communications and data organization for the county. And then here is 420 South 18th, which is what we will call the parent building. Also, I will have you, so in this particular drawing, what HDR has come up with is they have a few floors here for some sort of public use. What that is now is not really, has not really been identified. Here is what is called the courtroom expansion. So what they want to do is build new courtrooms for juvenile justice. And then these floors here would house attorneys. Right now, and then over here, this is the proposed detention center, the downtown jail. So right now, what's happened is the reason this building is here, or these buildings are proposed, is that in the courtroom right now, the attorneys, the county attorneys, and the are just crammed on top of each other. Their offices are really substandard and need to be fixed. The courts right now, they're in construction phase for an additional courtroom. So they're actually expanding the juvenile courtrooms in this building right now, but they propose that we're going to need more courts, and also we will need more space for attorneys. That's important to know. We will get back to that in a bit. So more space for courts, more space for attorneys. But then this is the most contentious part of this entire thing is the jail. As we look at this, one more thing I do want to point out is this space here. This escapes attention from most folks. HDR is proposing that we close 18th Street and put in a little parklet here, a tiny little park. So it does not, I do want to point out the park is not green space for any children in detention. This is just to close down the street from traffic. You'll notice here 18th Street is already closed down and built on this section here. So this would further restrict traffic downtown. This is another rendering that that HDR has put out of the supposed majesty of this downtown justice center and jail. Over here, you will see the existing library, the old, what we call the original downtown library. And then back here in the distance is the AIM building, or the grain exchange. And we will talk about that in a bit too. This is the building in question. This is 420 South 18th Street. It started off as a car manufacturing business in 1920. So in the 1920s, you had a lot of localized car manufacturing, and this was one of the spots they did that. It was converted for decades then into a car sales operation, and they actually have the original freight elevator in there so you can take cars up and down multiple levels. It was then used by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for scientific laboratory use. And then we call it the Perrin building now because architect and preservationist Bob Perrin currently owns this building and has had it for 5 years. Bob does have plans on this building to renovate it. He has not started that process yet, and the county wants to take this particular building and demolish it. We want to grind it into dust because it doesn't serve the purposes that the County Board of Commissioners has outlined right now. So we're going to go into some aerial maps for a second. So this red section here is our kind of our geography in question. This green roofed building here is the library. This is the OHA building that was recently sold to the county. So the OHA moved from here to here. I would mention that County Commissioner P.J. Morgan's business partner was the one who handled the transactions on this, and he made $330,000 in commission. Commissioner Morgan did separate himself out from that transaction, but his company currently represents several of the buildings in this particular area. So I do want to make sure that is clear to folks, is that there's a possible conflict of interest in this situation. So this is the Omaha Housing Authority building. This is the .com building, and this is the Perrin building. This is the parking area over here. And then this yellow area here, this is the current adult corrections facility. So this, you'll notice, is 2 blocks away from this proposed site for the juvenile justice facility. So essentially what they want to do is they want to put a jail for kids here, about 1,200 feet, 1,300 feet from the current jail here, from the adult jail, which is overcrowded and has been experiencing overcrowding problems, just like nearly every jail or prison in Nebraska. The other thing to notice on here, and it's maybe a little difficult to see, is there is very, very little going on here as far as development goes, as far as commercial activity goes in this particular area. Centered around a jail, you would expect that there is not a lot of traffic in this area and there's not a lot of economic development. That is a concern on multiple levels because, number one, you do have a clear sight line here. So from this corner, from this area here, you can see the razor wire of this adult facility. So imagine being a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old in detention with a possibility of seeing this adult facility just 2 blocks down the road. The other thing that we should be worried about is that there is a dead economic zone that surrounds this adult jail. We can only assume that with a second jail here, that will also create a dead zone of economic development and residential development in this area. This building, you'll notice, is the Flatiron Building. It's an iconic building downtown. The developer who just did a renovation project here also owns this building and a number of other buildings in the area. He has that is a Dicon construction, and they have about $100 million in plans for this particular zone. They've done what they call a micro or a mini master plan for this area. So they have, besides Bob having some idea on how to renovate this building and what he wants to do with that, there are also plans to develop out all this space for economic development. One of the other things to notice too is the Omaha Children's Museum, again, a block away from this proposed jail. So this is an area that is very delicate, economically speaking, because there's already a jail here, and there's this dead zone and some folks who are planning some things. But again, if you do build a jail here, there is a good amount of doubt that the rest of this will get developed. One of the questions that P.J. Morgan had to address in a news article recently, this week, is: would you live across the street? Would you live in this building across the street from a jail? One of the other perspectives on this is, again, this red is the building in question for that's slated for demolition if it's obtained by eminent domain. Bob does not want to sell this building, but the county is trying to force that sale. Everything in blue This is a parking garage. This is a parking lot for MUD. This is another parking lot. This is a parking lot, and then down here is another parking lot. This area is full of parking. Unfortunately, with HDR's plan, they want to put a parking garage here, a structure, parking structure here for, I forget how many millions of dollars, but there's a defined excess of parking in downtown Omaha. One of the reasons I say that is the Downtown Omaha 2030 plan identified an excess of parking, surface, lot, and street and structural parking in all sections of downtown. One of the reasons that's important is because the group that assembled that Downtown Omaha 2030 plan is HDR, the same organization that wants to level these buildings and put up a parking garage here. So we have some issues with this. One of the things that will pop up here in a couple of minutes is this yellow section here. This is the AIM building, or the Grain Exchange. This has traditionally served as offices for attorneys, and it is currently for sale. You'll notice the proximity of this building to the parking garage. The parking garage has underground passage from the parking garage to the city county building and to the district courts. So we have an opportunity, we already have underground passage here. And what HDR and the county are promoting here is an idea to build this block. But they're not answering questions why this building here on the next side here is not an alternative. And one of the things that people may be interested in is that MUD was approached about selling their building and parking lot, and they refused. They wanted an enormous amount of money for this particular location. They had the opportunity to contribute their space here, but they refused to do so. And that's resulting in the county then pursuing eminent domain on this particular building. This is an overhead view of the current Douglas County Youth Center, the current jail. This is located on 42nd Street here, 42nd and Woolworth. This building has capacity for 96 beds. It actually will hold up to 144 kids. And the way that the Douglas County Youth Center talks about capacity is that even though the building is designed for 144 people, the way they split out kids, juveniles, is they split them out by age, gender, and offense. So typically they rate the number of beds at 75% of capacity. So right here, this building is where kids are currently held, and then if needed, they are transported to the district court for whatever hearings they have. So one of the things to know is, again, this building is under capacity. There is not a compelling need a capacity need anyway, to get kids moved from this particular building to a different building. We're not actually building a larger building, we're building a smaller building. So here's where this gets a little tricky. So the proposed cost on this is $120 million. This would be the largest building project in the history of Douglas County. 120 million. It will raise your taxes, and there is no public vote. So you do not have an opportunity to get involved in the approval of this. The County Board of Commissioners has approved themselves to move forward with this project. I would note here that I'll go back here for a second, don't get dizzy. Out of that $120 million, 37 is earmarked for this, for the youth jail. So if you do a little bit of quick math, 120 minus 37 is $83 million. So what the county wants to do is spend $83 million on new offices for our county attorneys and new courts. The other number here that's important is this little strange math equation. So currently, the detention center that we have will house 96 kids. The proposed facility will house 48. The number of kids in detention in Douglas County is 77. To me, this is where the most pressing and critical problem is that we have, on average, 77 kids in detention, and that has not changed in 4 years. The last 4 years average, 77, 67, 78, and 79. There has not been a reduction in the number of children in detention in the last 4 years. Current capacity, current number of beds at the Douglas County Youth Center now, it's 96. So we can house the number of kids that we have in detention. However, the proposed building would have 48 beds. And Douglas County Board of Commissioners has no written strategy on how to reduce the number of kids in detention from 77 to 48. The question that should be on everybody's mind right now is, where do those kids go? Where do they go? So I have been involved in this process, or in this situation here, speaking out against to the county commissioners since July 10th. And I have asked that question repeatedly, and they do not have an answer. I contacted the current superintendent of the Douglas County Youth Center, Brad Alexander, and I said, Brad, I contacted him, I said, where would these kids go? And the answer back was, if we have, or we've never had, we haven't had a recent capacity issue like that. If we do, we have to investigate sending those kids to other youth detention centers. So the answer to this is, where the kids go is they have to leave the county. And it's undetermined at this point where they would go. If it's Lancaster County, Sarpy County, if they would have to go to a detention center in another state, we would have to transport those kids to whatever facility has room for them. And then we would also have to pay that county to house our kids in detention. Right now, imagine being 14 and undergoing one of the worst periods of your life, being locked up, and not only being locked up, but you're in a different county. And for most kids in the system, they are experiencing poverty. Their families are experiencing poverty. They are not able just to pick up and go to another county or even possibly another state to go visit their child in detention. This is the part of this plan that should get you angriest, because it is completely negligent for our commissioners to say things to the public like, don't worry about this, it's not going to happen. Because they have not shown that it's not going to happen. This is still a very real possibility, and this is completely out of line. So one of the things that we should talk about is, as we're looking at issues of participatory democracy and representative democracy, is how did we decide all of this? So we didn't. Our elected officials did. Also, there are 3 corporations involved who should be under some sort of scrutiny for this. It's HDR, the architectural company, it's Kiewit Construction, and it's Burlington Capital, which is run which was founded by Mike Yanni. These people have been behind the scenes with your county commissioners for years trying to get this project going. So these are the 7 commissioners that we should talk about, and these are the districts that you can find yourself in. So this is Commissioner Mike Boyle, former mayor of Omaha. Commissioner Jim Kavanaugh, Commissioner Chris Rogers, who is the county liaison here in charge of Juvenile Justice Services, PJ Morgan, former mayor of Omaha, Mark Kraft, Mary Ann Borgeson, and Claire Duda. If you are in one of their districts, these are the people that you should call. You should call, and if they're not in the office, get transferred to their cell phone. Talk to them now and make sure that you tell them that you do not support the plan they're putting forward. So far, in the July 10th vote, which is resolutions, when most of this stuff was formally decided as far as eminent domain, a private 501c3 to manage this construction process, things of that nature that we haven't even talked about yet. There was a 6-1 vote. Kavanaugh was the dissenting vote. He did not approve of the $120 million price tag of the eminent domain or of the 501c3 that was being proposed to run this. And again, private means that they are not subject to open meeting laws. Since that point, Mike Boyle has agreed that we should not use eminent domain, we should not build the detention center downtown, and we should use tax dollars to improve the Douglas County Youth Center at 42nd and Woolworth. So on Tuesday this week, we're going to have a vote on a resolution that Boyle is introducing. So we have an introduction and we have a second. We need to get these 2 of these other 5 commissioners to flip their stance and to represent the people of Douglas County in a fair way that involves us in decision making. This has been a very contentious issue for the last 11 weeks. The Douglas County clerk has even dedicated a section on their website for all of the meetings that have been held, all the minutes, all the videos, and all of the processes, all the things that the public has introduced, such as letters of request to stop this, and a map, or I guess a people map that shows how convoluted and this process is, because that 501c3 that we mentioned earlier, to manage this privately, Mary Ann Borgeson is on that board, PJ Morgan is on that board, and there are 2 other elected officials, Don Klein, who's Douglas County attorney, and then City Councilman Ben Gray. Those folks are on this 501c3 that supposedly will manage this process, which has its own set of problems because we haven't had transparency from these folks going at the first point. One of the other things to note is that there was a study, an assessment of the juvenile justice system and court space needs study. This was done by DLR Group and Shin Planning. This was awarded here, this was started in August of 2017. And one of the first things to note, and this is the introduction, the first thing to note here in the introduction is they have an item that says an assessment of secure detention requirements was not included in the original request for proposal. The original request that the building commission put forward was specific to the courtrooms, a courtroom expansion, and to the attorney's offices. From the start, this youth jail was an afterthought. So let me repeat that. The intention originally from the Omaha Douglas Public Building Commission was a study for courtrooms and for attorneys' offices. During the process, it was decided that a secure detention forecast should be developed. So this jail was an afterthought. In that section, or in this report, you'll also see numbers here from the Douglas County Youth Center, average daily population. Again, our most recent population here in for the year 2017 was 77. The superintendent for Douglas County Youth Center recently gave an update. I believe he said this year the average daily population is 82. These numbers are a little different from the numbers that we see in the Douglas County Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, but still we're showing that 77, 70, 76, 83, these numbers are not going down over the last 4 years. And this is a handy little chart that shows the same thing. His average daily population is not going down. It is not here at this level of 48 or 40 or 20 or 0 or however many people that, any kids that should be in detention. The other thing that shocked people is in the key findings. This is on page 79 of this report, and this is available on the Douglas County Clerk's website, so you can take a look at this. The first finding is there is no overall vision and mission statement for juvenile justice system in Douglas County. Your Douglas County Board of Commissioners is trying to build a $120 million facility. And one of the key findings is there is no overall vision. The next thing that is important to note is this third statement is data collection and reporting are not consistent and accurate to guide decision making. What this says is that the Douglas County is not maintaining proper records and is not collecting the proper records to guide decision making on juvenile justice issues, which is, again, obscene and negligent that we are trying to build a $120 million facility saying that we're going to need more room for judges, we're going to need more room for attorneys, but we're not going to need more room for kids. Part of the process that part of the process over the last couple of months is that we have had Jim Kavanaugh present an alternative. So remember that original price tag at 50 or at 120 million. This is a proposal that would meet some of the needs of Douglas County at a $50 million alternative. So notice here in this particular image, this is the county. This is the courtroom building over here. This is the city hall with our the city county building. This is that parking garage. And then this is the Perrin building that would be preserved. So one of the alternatives that Jim Kavanaugh has presented is for the county to acquire the AIM building, that grain exchange building, and renovate that, update it for attorneys and or city county staff. There's also a possibility to house those attorneys here in the city county building. And then we could build a smaller building here for courts. They've also put in here a couple of skywalks because who wants attorneys walking in the rain? Apparently they don't want to be outside. So we've got a couple of skywalks here that would connect these buildings for the comfort of our attorneys and for our judges. Along with this building, he has proposed renovations here to the Douglas County Youth Center. This is the current facility, and so we're looking at opportunities here to make some improvements that we have acknowledged that we need with the room for courts and for attorneys, but also the opportunity to improve the building that we currently own, the property that we currently own and utilize here. So this is the some estimates here, some cost comparison estimates that Jim put together. So right now, if you'll notice here, the reason that these numbers are a little wonky is because there's never really been a clear proposal and needs analysis and cost analysis for how this really works. But this is this $120 million price tag, how it might come out with the current proposal, and then a $50 million price tag on how this might come out with an alternative proposal. So again, one of the things that we can look at right away is a $30 million price tag difference in updating the current detention center and building a new one. This here also would not include a parking garage, but it also has a smaller building and other renovation costs, because instead of building this building higher, we can acquire an existing building here that has attorneys, private attorneys in it, and convert this for use for the county attorneys. So the time to act is right now. We have to be able to get in touch with our elected officials and tell them to stop the eminent domain process. Again, the reason to stop the eminent domain process is because it requires us to come up with a better plan, an alternative plan for how to proceed with solving the issues that we have with our courts, over our courtroom expansion, and with our county attorneys. But it also puts kids at the center of this conversation, because if we really truly are interested in improving juvenile justice in Douglas County, this plan that they've put out does not include any programs. It does not connect any services. It does not I don't know where that came from. It does not have any it doesn't have any connections to any services, programs. It doesn't show that we're going to reduce the number of kids in detention. It doesn't give us any sort of faith and confidence that these folks are going to actually do what we need to do for the county, which is to improve our services, but do it in a way that engages people. One of the other things to note is when the county, I'm going to blur back here for a second, so bear with me here. In deciding to build this particular project, the county never talked to any residents. They didn't talk to anybody who's been in the juvenile justice system. They talked to some heads of departments, heads of some nonprofit organizations, but they did not talk to any kids who have been in a jail. They didn't talk to the families who are already dealing with the system. They haven't talked to the public to find out, or to even make a case for this, to explain to us what the county needs are, what the alternatives are, what the ideas are, why we're doing what we're doing. So what we really are looking for longer term is an opportunity for the county to come out and actually work with us on this project. We want the opportunity to be involved. We want the opportunity to build this thing the way that it should be built, to improve programs the way that they should be improved, and to make sure that kids are being treated fairly and properly as this process, as they go through the juvenile system right now. Again, the bothersome things here is that, this says we're not putting kids first. This says we're not reducing the number of kids in detention. This says we don't have enough data to actually make decisions. We don't have a overall vision for this. So overall, this is the thing that bothers me the most, is that we're putting together these conversations for folks that doesn't really meet the needs of our community, and also doesn't put us together in a format to handle this together. So I'm going to turn this back over to Angie, if she wants to pop in here and allow our participants, our folks, to jump in and to start making some notations and some conversation about, or ask questions about this process, so that we can get it to the space that we need. So I'm going to, yep, there you are.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Unmute everything and get it up here. All right, so thank you, Brian. That was very informative. So we'll just open it up now. If anybody has any questions, then feel free to just unmute your microphones and chime in. Maybe no questions.
I'm going to unmute folks here. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question?
Courthouse dedicated for YouTube.
Or Angie, if you have any questions, Angie and Susan, I'll be happy to go back on any points or to have conversation about any of these items.
Yeah, Susan was just wondering, is the courthouse dedicated, like the court, that's being rebuilt, the plan there, is that dedicated just to juvenile justice, or will that be like all courts, like adult courts?
So yeah, what they've proposed here is just new buildings for juvenile justice courts. The current building, the current courtroom has both adult and juvenile courtrooms in it. But that's, yes, so you're exactly right that this is a $120 million plan specifically for juvenile courts.
Okay.
Has that been mandated?
Has that been mandated that it would be only used for juvenile, or?
That's how they're building it out. I don't think that there's any, so since we have combined services in the current courtroom, I don't think that there's anything that is specific from a legal standpoint that they need to separate out the juvenile and adult services.
Okay. Great. Are there any other questions from anyone that's on?
Hi, yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep, we sure can.
Okay. Brian, I want to see if you can comment on the shackling part that Ben Gray has brought up as an issue, and one of the main reasons that they need to have all the services co-located downtown. And then the other part of it is to make sure everyone who's listening understands how important it is that they come on Tuesday to express their concerns.
Sure. So great. A couple of great points. So one of the things that Ben Gray has said, and also Mark Kraft has claimed, is that the co-location, the locations of these buildings together would mean that children are not shackled as they are transferred from the housing portion of this into the courtroom part of this. Right now, since kids are transported from 42nd and Woolworth to this to the courthouse now, the procedure that the Douglas County Sheriff follows is to restrain them, which is shackles. It's hand shackles and leg shackles, which is standard process for transporting anyone who's in detention. So one of the things that the commission, so that Ben Gray and Mark Kraft in particular have said, is that with this new proposed building, children would no longer be shackled. They're trying to play off of our emotions, and unfortunately it is completely inaccurate. I talked to the, after they made those comments, I contacted the Douglas County Sheriff's Office and talked to the captain in charge of court services. And he said two things. Number one, nobody from the county has talked to us about this yet. And number two, if it's up to the county sheriff, they will continue to utilize those restraining practices, even if they're moving kids from a housing facility here into the courtrooms here. It's standard practice to restrain people in transit, and they claim it's for the safety of the officers as well as the detainees. So one of the things that's come out several times is that some of the things that are being claimed by the commissioners are not backed up by the partners that they should be contacting. The other issue that we've got is, so besides calling your elected officials, you have two other things that are coming up on Monday and Tuesday this week. So on Monday night at 7 p.m., there will be a public hearing. It is located here at 1819 Farnham, which is the city county building here. It's in legislative chambers. And that is the Administrative Services public hearing. Jim Kavanaugh is the commissioner in charge of administrative services, and he is going to have a public meeting at 7 p.m. so that people who work can actually attend. But he's going to talk about how the county is currently upgrading facilities on time and under budget without a tax increase, and also how we could update an alternative to this particular plan that he has proposed previously. So there's an alternative that we could explore that we need to have some public support on. On Tuesday, the County Board of Commissioners will have their standard meeting at 9 a.m., which is when they will introduce the resolution to rescind eminent domain and to essentially reboot the process, putting kids at the center of this process, and building out the courts and the attorney's offices as needed with input from the public, but at a lower cost. So that's why these things are important, is you have opportunities to come have your voice heard in a public setting and demand that the county commissioners respect the fact that they have not given us any sort of plan that for reducing the number of children in detention. They haven't given us any voice in approving a $120 million building project, and they haven't. They're stripping away private property rights by claiming eminent domain on this building in particular.
Great, thank you so much, Brian. That's exactly what I hoped could be explained. And also, just that the eminent domain that is set to hopefully be resolved on Tuesday really is a linchpin in their efforts. So calling, like you said, is important, and doing what we can to get 2 of those 5 commissioners at the very least to change their vote and go against that will help stop the whole system as it is planned now.
Right. The key element here is that the public is not arguing against more room for the attorneys and more room for courts. Right. The thing that's highly problematic is that we're putting a youth jail here that is too small to accommodate the number of kids that we currently have in detention. And it also takes to property by eminent domain. And there's no indication here that this is going to result in in better situation for the kids who are in detention. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be addressed by the county before we move forward with this building project. One of the other things to know is that I contacted the Jail Standards Division of the Nebraska Crime Commission, and they're the body that approves plans for building jails. And so they said, number one, Douglas County has not contacted us about this plan yet. In order for this to go through, they need to present a needs assessment, and we need to review that. That's a process that takes 3 to 6 months. Then they need to send us actual plans, architectural plans for this building that we need to review and compare against state and federal standards, which takes another 6 months. So in order for Douglas County to start building a prison, they need to go through a 12-month process with the Nebraska Crime Commission Jail Standards Division. What they're trying to do right now, this coming week, is to take a building and demolish all 3 of them so that they can essentially clear the space for a new jail and new courtrooms. They're moving very, very quickly on this without an apparent need.
Yes, and what I would like to just also say is that Mark Kraft had said a couple of weeks ago, that the public's concern about the services inside and exactly how the building would be built is not a concern, because right now all they have is the outside drawings and, quote, one architect's dream, which I find incredibly disturbing and something everyone should know about. We don't want to build $120 million on an architect's dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much.
Certainly. Was there somebody else that had a question?
Hi, this is Laura. Can you hear me?
Yes, Laura.
Do you want to review for everyone a little bit about the Chin report and their recommendations for best practices for a juvenile jail? What's best for the kids?
So one of the things that was just, so the Chin report for folks who need a refresher was that the report that the Omaha Douglas Building Commission requested in August of 2017. And it is unfortunately the only document that the county has shared with us. So this is the only information that we have about how the county got to this point in making their decisions. So we don't know really what their other site considerations were, what their how they got to their costs, et cetera. So a lot of this stuff has been obscured from public view. The Chin report, the Chin study is available on the Douglas County Clerk's website, or you can get a print copy of it on the 12th floor of the City County building at the Building Commission's office. In it gave a number of recommendations, and it did recommend a smaller facility for juvenile detention if the county can reduce the number of kids in detention by going through a series of processes that it has not yet accomplished. So I'm going to forget what the acronym stands for, but JDAI, which is a Juvenile Detention's Alternative Initiative, I believe, which is partially funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, is an initiative here at Douglas County to try to reduce the number of kids in detention. Unfortunately, as we can see from the last 4 years, they haven't done it. So building a smaller facility, or proposing a smaller facility at this point, without taking into consideration the lack of success with Douglas County's reduction initiatives, and also with a population an urban population that will be growing. It does recommend, it explores a couple of options, one of which is a facility that is essentially stacked like this and co-located. And it also gives a little heavier credence to what they call a campus facility, which would be a one-story facility or two-story facility that is laid out a little bit more like a high school campus, so that it feels less like a jail. It is has better access to green space or to air, so the kids aren't locked up all the time. And it also recommends, if we can, to give a heavier weight to that one. It does, in one of the pages, it does, I guess, dissuade the county from building a complex like this, something that has high prestige value, something that's big and ominous and looming. And so, unfortunately, that's the county commissioners seem to be more concerned with putting all these things together in one location, right here downtown, rather than exploring some alternatives that could really serve the needs of our youth better. One of the things that is also important to note is that in a public hearing, the superintendent of the Douglas County Youth Center said, "I have no idea what's being proposed." So at this point, he has not been involved in a conversation about how this building actually, how these buildings are put together, or what service, what's really located where. We haven't gotten to the point yet where we've talked about the inside of this building. We haven't talked about how it would actually we haven't had the question, we haven't had the opportunity really to have a dialogue with the commissioners on why they're doing what they're doing. So right now, all they're trying to do, they've approved, again, the $120 million budget. They've approved eminent domain to take this building. And they've also approved themselves as part of a private 501c3 corporation to oversee the building project. And we haven't even gotten to the conversation about why HDR, Kiewit, and Burlington Capital get to be involved in this $120 million project without any sort of bid. There's no public, at this point, it doesn't seem there will be any public bid on the construction, architectural design, or management of the building process. The Chin report, again, it's our only insight into the decision-making of the county commissioners, and it does not actually give us any confidence that the system is set up to successfully plan for better services and programs, much less rely on this building project to make that a reality.
Brian, I had a question come in. How much are PJ Morgan and Mary Ann Bergensen paid to be on the 501c3?
So at this point, I got I requested the filing for that 501c3 corporation. In it, it does allow for the board members to be compensated. We do not have a copy of the bylaws because as a private 501c3, they don't need to share the bylaws with us. So it's unclear at this point for me. I don't have any proof that they're being paid or they're not being paid. So what we did, a group that I'm working with, we filed a formal citizens complaint with the NADC, which is the Nebraska Accountability and Disclosures Commission. So the 4 elected officials who are on this board need to file a conflict of interest statement. At the time that I talked to the director of the NADC, they had not filed. So we filed a citizens complaint. We did find out that PJ Morgan did file a conflict of interest statement on August 31st. And then also these folks should have filed a contractual interest statement with the Douglas County clerk. I confirmed that none of them filed that conflict of interest statement. So we did file a complaint with the county clerk as well. Again, it's Don Klein, who's the county attorney. It's Ben Gray, who's a city council representative, and then Commissioners Mary Ann Borgeson and PJ Morgan. So right now, we have filed ethics complaints against them for not filing conflict of interest statements, but that's that's an investigation that is underway.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody else have any questions before we go? All righty. Well, then I'd like to thank Brian very much for your time. You have some great information, and we have recorded the conversation, so we'll be posting the video to try and help folks that couldn't get online be able to get the information and see informed. So that'll go up on the event for those of you that might want to share the video with friends, family, neighbors to help get them more informed. And then just to recap, Brian, so we'll call our commissioners, and then there's the meetings on Monday and Tuesday.
Right, and you can find all this stuff online too, as far as the meetings go. We are trying to get folks to the public meetings so that, again, showing up face to face and having a 5-minute conversation with your elected officials is powerful. They haven't expected the amount of backlash and public engagement on this that we have had. So people can do that, but if they're unable to get to the like this over here, if they're unable to get to the those meetings, you can again call this number here, 402-444-7025, and ask to get transferred to these folks' cell phones. You should have a one-to-one conversation with them rather than just leaving a voicemail or a phone message.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining in on the call, and thank you, Brian, for your information and your work on this. So,
You're welcome. I appreciate the invitation.
thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.